In 1978, in the bustling heart of New York City, stood the old Grantwood Hotel, a place of luxury, of secrets, and after one fateful night, a place of tragedy. Following a terrible incident that the management quickly hushed up, one room was sealed forever. Its number was 46. The staff who remained, the ones who knew to keep their mouths shut, had a different name for it. They called it the Vault Room, because whatever was locked behind that door, well, that was a secret only the highest levels of management were privy to, and the ones who knew, they never seemed to stick around long enough to share the tale. It was as if the secret itself consumed them, leaving behind nothing but whispers and a permanently locked door on the 4th floor. Fast forward 45 years to one night in 2023, the Grantwood Hotel, now a relic of a bygone era, was finally scheduled for a complete renovation. The new owners, a faceless corporation with no attachment to the hotel's dark history, wanted every single room inspected, every corner accounted for. The renovation crew eventually found their way to the 4th floor and to the infamous room 46. A warning, painted in faded red letters, was still visible on the door. Do not open. Locked for a reason. It was a stark, chilling message from the past. The new manager, a man named Ethan, was not the superstitious type. He saw the warning not as a genuine threat, but as a relic, a silly prank from decades ago. To him, it was just an obstacle standing between him and a completed inspection report. Ignoring the palpable apprehension of his team, he decided the door had to come down. With 3 other staff members, a young maintenance worker, a nervous security guard, and a skeptical architect, he prepared to breach the seal. After a few heavy shoves against the old wood, the lock splintered and the door groaned open, revealing the darkness that had been trapped inside for nearly half a century. The air that rushed out was stale and icy cold, carrying a scent of dust and something else, something metallic and old. The room was pitch black, a void that seemed to swallow the light from the hallway. As their eyes adjusted, a single object became visible in the center of the room, stark against the emptiness. It was an old steel vault locker, the kind you'd see in a pre-war bank. It was covered in a thick layer of dust, and an unnatural cold radiated from its surface. As they stepped closer, flashlights cutting through the gloom, they saw something that made the hairs on their arms stand up. Scratched crudely into the metal door of the vault were 3 words: "Donna set them free." The warning on the vault was far more unsettling than the one on the room door. This felt personal, desperate. But they had come this far. Ethan, driven by a mix of curiosity and professional duty, found the vault's handle. It wasn't even locked. With a deep, groaning screech of rusted metal, the heavy door swung open. Inside, resting on a velvet lining that had long since decayed, was not what they expected. There was no treasure, no hidden documents. There was only a small, intricately carved wooden box. It felt strangely warm to the touch, a stark contrast to the cold steel that had encased it. A sense of dread began to creep into the room, thick and suffocating. With trembling hands, Ethan lifted the wooden box out of the vault. The others huddled closer, their flashlights converging on the object in his hands. He unlatched the tiny clasp and slowly lifted the lid. Inside, nestled on faded satin, were 3 items. First, an old audio tape reel, the kind used in vintage recorders. Second, a single black and white photograph of a woman with haunting dark eyes that seemed to stare right through them. And third, a small yellowed piece of paper, folded neatly. A note. Ethan unfolded it. The handwriting was shaky, panicked. It read, "Whoever listens becomes the next." Silence. The 4 of them stood frozen, the note's cryptic warning hanging in the air. The security guard muttered something about leaving, about sealing the room back up. But Ethan, now completely captivated by the mystery, pointed to the audio tape. "We have to know," he said, his voice barely a whisper. The maintenance worker had an old portable reel-to-reel player in his toolkit, a relic he kept for odd jobs. It was a long shot, but they threaded the fragile tape into the machine. After a moment of static and hiss, a voice emerged from the small speaker. It was a woman, her voice trembling with sheer terror. She whispered, "They come back. Every time. When they find someone new, please, don't open room 46. Her words were punctuated by ragged breaths, as if she were hiding, speaking in mortal fear. The voice continued, growing more frantic. "They're always here, watching from the corners. Waiting for the sound of a new voice?" Suddenly, her whisper was cut short by a blood-curdling scream that ripped through the speaker, distorted and horrifyingly loud. And then the tape went silent, an abrupt cut. In that same instant, a deafening slam echoed through the room. The vault door had slammed shut on its own. They spun around, flashlights darting wildly. They were trapped. A wave of freezing cold air, far colder than before, began to circle the room, caressing their skin like icy fingers. Panic set in. They pounded on the vault door, on the room door, but their shouts were swallowed by the oppressive silence. Then the architect let out a strangled gasp. He was pointing his shaky flashlight at the photograph, which had fallen to the floor. The woman in the picture, her eyes. They were looking to the side now. They had moved. A low whisper seemed to come from all around them, the same terrified voice from the tape, but now it was live, in the room with them. Then, in the four corners of the pitch-black room, something began to take shape. Out of the deepest shadows, four dark figures materialized. They were tall and slender, their forms indistinct, their faces lost in the gloom. They didn't walk. They glided, moving slowly, silently, closing in on the four terrified people trapped in the center of the room. The last thing they saw were the shadowy figures extending their long, thin arms towards them. The next morning, the renovation crew arrived to find room 46 sealed again, the door freshly painted and the lock replaced. It looked as if it had never been opened. But this time, no screams were ever heard from behind the door. There was only silence. The crew foreman, noticing something new, walked closer to the steel vault inside the now sealed room, which he could just glimpse through a crack. On its cold, metal surface, a new line had been freshly carved, scratched into the steel just below the original warning. It read, 4 more inside. Don't open again.